Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're standing on a cracked front walk where the porch light flickers like a nervous eyelid, and a suitcase clicks against the concrete while a door locks from the wrong side. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I like seeing our little constellation of night owls. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The lock turned, and with it, a decade. Ria's voice came muffled through the wood. "We'll bring your things later." Behind the peephole, my son Caleb hovered, chin down, eyes elsewhere, the human equivalent of a loading screen. "It's time you take care of yourself," he added. The way people recite lines they don't believe. My keys, all 3 of them, fit the knob like years fit memory perfectly and did exactly nothing. I didn't shout. Night carries gossip farther than day. I set my suitcase on the step and looked at the porch I painted twice and the railing I sanded for splinters the summer Caleb skinned both knees and still insisted he didn't cry. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chimes voted for calm. Elder wisdom. When a door closes in your face, your dignity is the thing you must not drop. Pick up your phone, not your voice. I dialed 911 because illegal is illegal even when it wears family. The dispatcher's tone was starch and sympathy. Name? Address? Is anyone hurt? I answered in sentences that could stand upright while I waited. I sat on the suitcase and reviewed the list of things I wouldn't do tonight. Pound, plead, perform history as a favor to people who were tired of hearing it. Headlights slid across the curb. The responding officer unfolded from the cruiser with the posture of a man who learned his authority early and hasn't examined it much since. Sergeant Dalton, Ria's father. Of course. He glanced at me, then at the door, then at the ring camera, pretending to be neutral. "Evening, Ms. Evelyn," he said, picking my name like it was on sale. "Says here there's a family disagreement. Academic phrase of the day. Self-help eviction. The public argument that a landlord, or anyone pretending to be one, cannot circumvent court process by changing locks, shutting off utilities, or harassing occupants out where I live. Even owners must use the courts. Doors don't become judges just because someone has a screwdriver." I told him I lived here, that my mail said so, that my toothbrush had seniority. He nodded in a way that meant he'd already agreed with someone else. "Best to cool off, ma'am," he said. "Stay with a friend. They'll sort it in the morning." He didn't knock. He didn't ask for IDs from the 2 silhouettes on the other side of my door. He did, however, perform that classic maneuver where a person writes something down without looking to see if the truth fits the lines. He left. The cruiser's taillights shrank like excuses. I stood up, brushed grit from my palms, and decided to give my suitcase wheels the dignity of motion. 2 houses down. The sidewalk lifted into the glow of a car, idling like a patient animal. The driver stepped out, tall, silver at the temples. The same laugh lines that used to catch summer when we were 19. "Evelyn?" he asked, as if saying my name could reverse an eclipse. "It's me, Adrian. Adrian Ward. The first boy who wrote me a poem that didn't rhyme. The first man I didn't marry because life had a different kind of ambition." He looked at my suitcase, then at my face. "It's late," he said, "and you're locked out. Not a question. Let me help." Light joke number 1. I told him I had a strict policy of not getting into cars with handsome strangers. "Good," he said. "I only offer ugly kindness." It wasn't ugly, and he knew it, and the laugh loosened something I'd been white-knuckling for an hour. His car smelled like citrus and upholstery that keeps secrets. "Where to?" he asked. I was about to name the budget motel near the freeway when he shook his head. "I have a guest room, windows that open, tea at night and coffee the way adults like it. I hesitated. "I'm not unfinished business," I said. "I'm current trouble." "I'm not a rescue," he replied. "I'm logistics." That word, steady, unromantic, lowered its shoulder under my worry and lifted. We drove past the neighborhood park where Caleb scraped those knees, past the laundromat that sells both soap and lottery dreams, past my house, the place formerly known as Ours, where Ria's silhouette hung in the living room like a warning label. Adrian's house sat on a quiet street with oaks that have opinions. He carried my suitcase like it contained glass. Inside. The air smelled faintly of toast and varnish. Books lined a wall as if sentences could make a scaffolding. A framed black and white hung above an old piano. 2 teenagers on a pier. The boy's hair a wind argument. The girl's grin the size of a county. "I kept the pier," he said. "Best thing I ever built, except maybe the habit of making copies of everything." "Copies of everything?" I asked, letting the tea in my hand talk my nerves down a step. He tapped a file box near the desk. "Property records," he said. "Public ones. I read them like some people read horoscopes. Sometimes they tell you who thinks they're in charge." He didn't stare at me. He let the sentence float in the room until it found where to sit. Sidebar. Odd fact, the average house key is cut with 5 ridges, each a precise depth that corresponds to a number. Locksmiths call it the bidding code. Change one number by a hair, and the lock refuses choreography. Families work like that, too. Tiny misalignments that turn into doors that won't say yes. "I was driving by when I saw Dalton's cruiser," he said. "I know his taillights. They don't mean safety to everyone." His mouth made a line. "I've kept an eye on you since the hospital, after your wrist," he added softly. "From a distance. Not to spy, to be available." I watched steam lift from my mug like a quiet amen. "Ria changed the locks," I said, while Caleb recited a sentence. "Dalton declined to be a public servant." "And you," he said, eyes kind but not indulgent, "did not perform rage good. Rage is expensive. Save the receipt." The guest room held a quilt the color of early pears and a lamp that preferred reading. Adrian set my suitcase by the dresser and, like a person who has sat with grief, did not make the bed into a metaphor. "We'll handle morning in morning," he said. "For tonight, shower on the left, towel warmer on the right. Extra toothbrush in the top drawer because I believe in redundancy." Light joke number 2. "Redundancy is sexy," I said. He laughed. "Don't start rumors. We'll both have to file paperwork." Tea made the kind of music steam makes in civilized houses. We sat at the kitchen table, a place built for truth. Adrian slid a folder toward me. On top, a printout of a county filing with Ria's maiden name, then another with her first married name, then another. "Patterns," he said, the way detectives on shows say motive. 2 prior marriages, both with brisk asset transfers, both with older in-laws who lost addresses right after Christmas. The dates formed a ladder I didn't like the angle of. "Caleb thinks he's strong when he's compliant," I said. "He learned that from me. I called it accommodating." Adrian did not seize the confession. He let it breathe and turned the page. "Dalton knows the difference between a civil matter and an eviction," he said. "He gave inertia a badge tonight. That won't stand in daylight." Academic phrase of the day, bonus track, because I needed 2 tonight. Notice to quit. The public argument that even when someone has a lawful right to ask you to leave, they must do it in writing, with time to respond, and with a court's blessing if you say no. Locks don't issue notices. People do. And they sign their names where a judge can see. I asked the practical question. "Where will I stand tomorrow?" "At the clerk's counter at 9, he said. "We'll file a wrongful lockout complaint and a request for immediate access order. And," he tapped another folder, "we'll record a letter of interest on your parcel." "A what?" "A public flag," he said. "Title offices call it Notice of interest, it says. Eyes are on this. Paper can be a porch light. Light joke number 3. Does the county accept payment in oatmeal cookies? I asked. They prefer ink, he said, but they are cookie friendly. I took the guest room, showered gratitude off my shoulders, and stood in a towel looking at a face that has weathered, not withered. The mirror offered the truth I like least and need most. I'm not done. I braided my hair low so morning could be practical on the nightstand. Someone had set a small index card that read, in neat hand, you are not a problem to be managed. You are a person to be honored. Adrian's pen, his penmanship. The first boy who wrote me a poem that didn't rhyme had learned to write sentences that do. Before sleep, I texted Caleb, I am safe. I will see you tomorrow in daylight with witnesses. Do not bring locksmiths or metaphors. The dots pulsed. He wrote, I love you. Then, nothing else. Good. Sometimes restraint is the first apology. I turned off the lamp. The house settled. A ship on a patient lake. Somewhere down the hall. Adrian opened a window. Air moved through the rooms like permission. Tomorrow, I would stand with paper and a name and a friend who brought logistics. Tonight, I lay in a bed that belonged to choices I could live with and let the fan hum me toward a morning that deserved verbs. Morning found the house smelling like cinnamon toast and new paper. Adrian already had a stack by the kettle, forms with tabs, a checklist in his block letters, and 2 pens that looked like they'd passed the bar. He poured coffee into a mug the weight of a good promise and slid me a plate. Eat enough to spell your name without wobbling, he said. I did. Grief likes to tilt the room. Protein puts the legs back on chairs. We drove with the windows barely cracked, letting the cool pry open the night at the county building. The lobby plants pretended they were thriving, and a security guard stamped time with the seriousness of a drummer. Adrian nudged the door to the clerk's office with his shoulder, the way people do when their hands are busy with hope. Good morning, said a woman with braid, glasses, and a name badge that made Lark look inevitable. Adrian set the forms down like a small, polite thunder. Wrongful lockout, immediate access order, he said. And we'd like to record a notice of interest on parcel 17-042B. Miss Lark raised one eyebrow at notice of interest, the way a bird considers an unexpected seed. You came prepared, she said. That speeds the universe. Elder wisdom. When fear says rush, switch to prepare. Rushing makes noise. Preparing makes progress. Filling out the wrongful lockout affidavit was both simple and exhausting. Address, dates. The sentence I reside at, written in my own hand, as if handwriting could call furniture back into a room. Miss Lark notarized, the stamp making that soft. Official thud I've started to crave. Take this to Judge Turner's chambers, she said, adding a page to our stack. He likes sentences with verbs. Academic phrase of the day, ex parte temporary restraining order. The public argument that a judge can issue a short-term order protecting a person's status, like access to their home, even before the other side is heard, when delay risks harm. It isn't a win. It's a pause button that gives process a chance to catch up. We sat on a hard bench outside chambers while the clock practiced being patient. Adrian reviewed the notice of interest with me again. 1 page. Recorded. Essentially a porch light in the records. I, Evelyn, have a claim and am watching. It doesn't create rights. It announces you plan to keep the receipts. People behave differently when they know the hallway has lights, he said. Judge Turner brought us in with the air of someone who'd successfully folded a fitted sheet. He read my affidavit, asked 3 questions that preferred nouns to adjectives, and signed the temporary order like he was pressing the brake on a rolling cart. Deputies can accompany you, he said. No one changes locks without court due process. He slid copies to Miss Lark for filing. She frog-clipped them, a cheerful amphibian punctuation to the morning. Light joke number 1. I whispered to Adrian that the frog was now our co-counsel. Admitted to the bar of common sense, he replied, solemn as a cathedral. We drove to my street with a deputy trailing polite distance. The porch looked the same if you didn't know how much it had cost to see it. Ria opened the door before we knocked, as if she'd set an alert for shoes on the walk. We were just about to call. She lied, voice sugared, eyes calculating. Caleb appeared behind her, cleaner shaven than last night, remorse ironing the edges of his posture. The deputy explained the order in his calm, laminated tone. Ma'am, Miss Evelyn is to have immediate access. No removal of property without mutual inventory. Any dispute goes back to the court, not the toolbox. He handed Ria a copy. She read the judge's signature like it was a weather report that had betrayed her. I stepped inside. The air smelling faintly of lemons and a decision someone tried to make without me. My photos still lined the hall, the bowl on the entry table still held the keys that did not work. I picked up the bowl and let the keys ring, small, stubborn bells. We'll change the locks again, Ria said, smile fixed. Properly. The deputy lifted a finger. Or, he said evenly, you will not. Caleb's eyes found mine and held. Mom, he said softly. In daylight, I answered, and with witnesses. I felt Adrian behind me like a steady doorframe. We walked room by room, inventorying without venom. I named the furniture and the ordinary poetry of a house, the blue chair by the window, the quilt my sister pieced, the ceramic dish that holds rubber bands that think they're immortal. Ria rolled her eyes at the list until the deputy's pen stopped. Then she became fascinated by baseboards. Sidebar, odd fact, rubber bands actually age faster in the cold. The polymers lose elasticity sooner in a refrigerator than at room temperature, somewhere. A drawer of rubber bands is complaining about winter the way old knees do. When we reached the kitchen, Adrian leaned quietly toward the sink and peered at the base of the disposal. Interesting, he murmured. New unit, brand I happen to know. Dalton's brother-in-law installs these under friends and family. He didn't say the rest out loud. I tucked the hint where it belongs. In the folder labeled pattern, not proof. We paused at my bedroom door. Ria moved to block it. The deputy placed the tip of his pen on the order. She stepped aside. The room looked touched, not ransacked. Just rearranged by someone who believed their taste deserved tenure. I wrote, bedroom, items present, moved, and underlined moved because nothing weaponizes politeness like documentation. Light joke number 2, I told the deputy I'd like to file a separate motion against whoever tangled my necklaces. He said he lacked jurisdiction over jewelry knots, but sympathized in principle. We didn't stay. The point was access, not victory laps. I gathered 2 days of clothes. My prescription. The shoebox of letters that remembers how love learned to write. And the watercolor set that still smells faintly of lake. Ria watched like a cat guarding imaginary cream. Caleb stood still long enough to look like a man who had decided to do something difficult later. I told him when. 4 o'clock. Annex Conference Room B, daylight rules. Light. Back at Adrian's. We sat at his kitchen table like it was a courtroom that serves soup. He turned a small laptop so I could see public records I didn't know I could see. Ria's first marriage, he said. Clicking. Filing date. Transfer. Restraining order later dismissed as moot once the address changed. Second marriage. Click. Similar ladder. Dalton's complaints, IA, ignored, then retired with honors. Click. Pattern. 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 Why are you doing this? I asked, the question with too many chairs. Adrian kept his eyes on the screen, then looked up slow. Because there's a difference between rescuing and reinforcing, he said. I can't rescue what you won't claim, but I can reinforce every place you stand. He paused, also because once, a long time ago, I was the boy who should have walked you home and didn't. I'm not interested in repeating that sentence. I let that sit in the room where the air understood things. Adrian, I said, I'm not a girl on a pier. No, he smiled. You're the captain of your own ferry. He slid a fresh list across. Next, utilities. We put the accounts on no change without in-person ID. We add a password only you and I know, and that password is not the name of a pet with an Instagram account. Academic phrase of the day, bonus, because utility companies speak a dialect of bureaucracy. Identity lock, the public argument that a consumer can require in-person verification for changes to critical services. Turning off the spigot on helpful relatives with fast fingers. We made calls. I said my name calmly to 3 different customer service reps and learned their favorite snacks because people who hear you as a person tend to protect your electricity. Adrian passed me sticky notes with security questions I would actually remember. The title of my first favorite book, the street where I learned to ride a bike, the word on the quilt label my sister always stitched in the corner. Light joke number 3. When one rep asked my childhood best friend's middle name, I said, "We were 7. We didn't trade middle names. We traded stickers." She laughed and let me pick a new question. Civilization. One chuckle at a time. By mid-afternoon, the annex confirmed our room. I texted Caleb. Conference B, recorder visible. No locksmiths or metaphors. He replied, I'll be there. Ria said nothing. Sometimes silence wears heels. You can hear it coming down the hall. Before we left, Adrian took me to his study. On the wall hung a map of the city with pinheads brighter than thumbtacks. People put themselves on maps, he said. If you watch long enough, you can see who's cutting corners. Dalton's routes don't always pass by truth. He pinched the bridge of his nose. I will be careful. You will be careful. We will let the record do the shouting. I stood at the window. The street outside looked ordinary, which is the camouflage life prefers. A father jogged while pushing a stroller that dreamed of being a parade float. A dog debated a squirrel and lost somewhere. A neighbor opened a mailbox and sighed. The day, bless it, had the decency to keep going. We drove to the annex with the recorder ready and my copy of the court order paper-clipped to courage. Conference B smelled like carpet and pencils that have known better days. I set the recorder in the middle of the table like a small, benevolent spaceship. Adrian squared the folders the way a man builds a runway. At 3:59, the door opened. Caleb entered alone. His hands were empty, which felt like a good omen. Where's Ria? I asked. Running late, he said. And for the first time in weeks, I heard his voice without someone else's script taped to it. We can begin, Adrian said gently. Daylight poured through the blinds like a witness. Caleb sat with his hands flat on the table like he was trying to convince the wood he belonged. Adrian placed a legal pad between us. Not as a shield, more like a runway. For the record, he said in that librarian calm of his, we're here to discuss an unlawful lockout, the path back to lawful occupancy, and any pressures applied by third parties. He glanced at my son. We are not here to shame. We are here to sort. Caleb's throat worked. I thought, he began, then stopped, then chose a smaller sentence. I was afraid. It landed with the weight of a chair pulled out for truth. I nodded. Fear makes fast editors, I said. It cuts the lines where love breathes. Adrian clicked the recorder. We'll keep this boring, he promised, which in our world qualifies as tenderness. He slid a stack to Caleb, last night's temporary order, our inventory notes, copies of the utility identity locks. You'll initial that you've received them, he said. Not agreement, receipt. Daylight likes receipts. The door opened at 4:07. Ria arrived already talking. Traffic, she sang, then turned to me with a smile that knew how to pose. Oh, good. You started without me. She slid into a chair, placed a pen diagonally like a runway model, and assessed the recorder as if it were an accessory that clashed. Adrian did not look at the smile. He looked at the clock. "We begin on time," he said. "We end on time. We keep our verbs short." He handed her copies of the same stack. She did not touch them, which is a tell I've come to respect. Academic phrase of the day: constructive eviction, the public argument that making a home unlivable, changing locks, killing utilities, intimidation can amount to an eviction even if no one says out. Law dislikes pretending. It calls the behavior by its effect. "I didn't evict anyone," Ria said sweetly. "I asked for space. This house is stressful." Adrian tapped the order. "Courts provide space," he said, "not screwdrivers." Caleb looked at the paper, then at me. "I signed the locksmith receipt," he blurted. "I thought it was maintenance." He flinched at his own word. "Maintenance is for sinks," I said gently, "not mothers." Elder wisdom. When you're tempted to excuse a harm with a nice word, stop and rename it plain. Polite synonyms are camouflage for regrets that prefer to hide. Adrian opened a thin folder with 4 documents arranged like a proof. "Miss Ria," he said mildly, "I'm going to summarize public records. You can correct me where I'm wrong." He named the counties. He named the case numbers: marriage, property transfer, quitclaim, another marriage, a similar choreography, a similar coda. He slid copies across, the kind of quiet that follows paper pressed down on the room. Ria considered the ceiling as if it were a skylight into a better script. "People have histories," she said. "I'm not on trial." "No," Adrian agreed. "You're at a table. Tables are where patterns learn to speak." He placed a printout face down, then flipped it carefully. An internal affairs summary with black bars covering enough to be legal and not enough to be comforting. "Sergeant Dalton has been cautioned about family interventions," he said. Tone neutral. "No discipline. Many reminders." He did not look at her. He looked at the page like a person who prefers nouns to gossip. Ria's smile tightened. A silk ribbon discovering it is actually a tourniquet. "This is character assassination," she said. "This is harassment." "This is a meeting," Adrian answered, even and quiet. "You are welcome to leave at any time, but while you are here, we will keep the record clean." Sidebar, odd fact, traditional watermarking in paper isn't ink. It's a change in fiber density made by a patterned wire in the paper mold. Hold it to light and a ghost image appears. Lilies, crowns, dates. Paper remembers in shadows as well as lines. I thought of that as Adrian lifted each document and let the overhead fluorescence show what's woven in. He drew a line with his finger down the agenda: access, boundaries, restitution for the illegal lockout. "We propose," he said, "that Evelyn resumes full occupancy immediately under the court's order, that any future change be sought only through the court, and that you," he nodded toward Ria and then Caleb, "reimburse costs related to the lockout, locksmith, temporary lodging if needed, and filing fees." He set the dollar figures beside the words like small, polite weights. Ria laughed once, bright and brittle. "You think I'm paying to move her back in?" "No," Adrian said, unblinking. "I think you will be ordered to. Paying now is how you tell the future you learned faster than you had to." Light joke number 1. I murmured that we accept payment in cashier's checks and oatmeal cookies, in that order. Caleb smiled despite himself. Ria did not find the pastry economy amusing. Caleb pushed a breath out between his teeth. "I can cover the fees," he said. "I will, and the locksmith, and..." He looked up, eyes asking permission to be better. "And I will make a statement about who told me to call him." He didn't look at Ria when he said it. That felt merciful and accurate. Ria's chair scraped a complaint. "You're really going to throw me to the wolves," she said. "Performing woundedness like an elective." "No," I said quietly. "We're handing you to daylight. Wolves dislike paperwork." Adrian checked his watch. "Next," he said gently. "Mortgage." He pulled a final folder. Different paper stock, edges crisp. When the bank flagged missed payments, he began. The note became eligible for purchase. I purchased it. He looked at Caleb first. Not to foreclose, to prevent someone else from using it to control your mother. Caleb went still, as if the chair had become a raft and he'd decided to stop rocking it. You own the mortgage? He asked, both alarmed and relieved. I hold the note, Adrian corrected, precise. It gives me standing to insist on rules and to refuse games. We will restructure so payments are humane and scheduled. Or we will sell on terms Evelyn chooses. What will not happen is a refinance that makes her a guest in her own history. Ria's voice lost some starch. You're obsessed, she said. With her. Adrian considered that, then nodded once. I'm committed to fairness, he said. The rest is a nice story for other rooms. Light joke number 2. I told them that if anyone insisted on the word obsessed, we could rebrand it as extremely competent nostalgia. Even Adrian let the corner of his mouth tilt. We spent the next 20 minutes making a list that could be notarized. Caleb would courier a cashier's check to the clerk by morning for fees and locksmith. We'd change the locks again with me present. Keys distributed in adult fashion. Names on a card. Dates next to names. Ria would not initiate any service change. Delivery hold or address forward. All conversations about the property would occur at the annex or in a lawyer's office, not over dinner or driveways. Light joke number 3. I added a house rule. No legal metaphors after 8 p.m. Caleb said that was tyranny. I said it was bedtime for bad ideas. Even the deputy at the door smothered a smile. Caleb signed the received lines, then the agreed lines. Ria refused to sign anything, which is her right, but she did take photos of every page, which means even her phone wanted the minutes. This isn't over, she said, standard issue cliffhanger voice. Adrian nodded. Correct, he said. It's underway. When the meeting ended, we walked out into a corridor where the lights buzzed like patient bees. Caleb touched my elbow, a small old-fashioned gesture that said, "Forgive the learning curve." "I'll meet you at the house at 10, he said. "We'll do the keys properly." "Daylight," I reminded him. He repeated the word as if it had vitamins. In the car. Adrian didn't drive right away. He rested his hands on the wheel and let the engine purr like a cat who reads law. "You all right?" he asked. "I am less lopsided," I said. "That'll do," he answered. "We keep laying planks." We stopped by the hardware store to arrange for a licensed locksmith who prefers judges to shortcuts. The clerk, a woman with a braid and a drill bit tattoo, scheduled us for 10 sharp. "2 keys for now," I said. "1 for later." She understood more than the word said. "We cut keys," she replied. "But you'll be deciding who gets them. That's the part that keeps people safe." At Adrian's house. The evening rehearsed its soft light along his books. He made tea, then took out 1 more envelope, this one with my name in the same steady hand as the peer photograph's caption. "I've planned for contingencies," he said. "A property trust with you as grantor, me as trustee if you ask, a clause that triggers if the world tries to make you small." He didn't push it across. He let it rest where consideration lives. "Not tonight," he added. "Tonight you sleep. Tomorrow we file what we already agreed." I stood at the window again and watched the street do nothing dramatic. A teen on a skateboard improvised balance. A mother adjusted a baby hat like a crown of cotton. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked time into grass with the confidence of a metronome. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Careful who you trust." No punctuation. I forwarded it to Adrian and deleted it from my screen. I trust daylight, I thought. I trust paper with names. I trust a meeting that starts on time and ends before we confuse exhaustion with consent. Before bed. I wrote 3 short lines in my notebook. Keys belong to the person who sleeps without rehearsing apologies. Love without boundaries is a hallway with no doors. Tomorrow at 10, the lock will say yes because we will have taught it how. The guest room welcomed me like a chair that doesn't squeak. I set the pen on the card that said I was a person to be honored and turned off the lamp. In the dark. The day dialed itself down, somewhere in another house. Someone was planning a metaphor and a screwdriver. Here. We were planning a receipt and a key ring. I picked the future I could sleep beside. At 9:58, the locksmith's van pulled to the curb like a decent sentence arriving with its verb attached. The woman from the hardware store, braid, drill bit tattoo, stepped out with a tool roll that looked both capable and kind. Caleb was already on the porch, hands out of his pockets on purpose. Ria sat in the front room pretending to read a lifestyle magazine the way a fox pretends to garden. "Good morning," the locksmith said, voice with sawdust in it. "Licensed, insured, allergic to shortcuts." She glanced at the deputy posted by the walkway. Turner's order had sent us a shadow with a badge, and then at me. "You the one who sleeps here?" I said yes. "Then you're the one who chooses," she replied. And that phrase relaxed a muscle I'd been clenching since Thursday. Elder wisdom. Give keys only to people who check the stove before they check their phones. It saves more than dinner. We did it by the book. The deputy read the order out loud for the room to hear, even though it was already printed and frog-clipped. The locksmith removed the illegal cylinder and held it up like a molted snakeskin. "Cheap," she said gently. "Looks like it wanted to be a lock, but didn't quite get the job." She slid in the new hardware with the humming competence of someone who knows which way threads prefer to turn. 2 keys cut now, 1 blank tagged later and sealed in a small envelope. Names on the card: Evelyn, Caleb. The deputy initialed the margin like a grown-up substitute for magic. Ria hovered by the archway, arms folded in a sash of indignation. "I hope you understand," she said into the room. "This arrangement is temporary." I nodded, as if we were discussing weather. "That's why we chose hardware that understands weather," I said. The locksmith did not laugh, but her shoulders told the truth. Academic phrase of the day: exclusive possession. The public argument that the person entitled to occupy a dwelling controls entry, copies, and terms. Even co-owners can't barge in or change locks without consent or court. Houses are not group chats. We walk the boundary like surveyors. Who holds which key? When? Who can enter? Under what notice? Where the spare lives? Sealed. At the clerk's office with a note. And what happens if a key wanders? Caleb signed the key card with steady block letters. When I handed him his copy, he put it on his own ring. Not the communal hook he'd adopted in marriage. It made a bright sound that landed like a promise. Light joke number 1. I asked the locksmith if the keys came with a no drama chip. She said that model was back-ordered, but she could engrave "behave" on the head. We settled for smooth edges and a receipt. Ria drifted room to room, staging small sighs. "We need to talk about the mortgage," she said finally, voice sharp enough to suggest cutting paper. "We will," I answered, "with paper." Adrian, right on time, stepped into the doorway with the calm of a person who trusts clocks. He set a folder on the table as if it were a bowl of apples. "Here's the forbearance agreement," he said to Caleb, "and the restructured payment plan. It keeps your mother safe and gives you a way to be better than yesterday." Ria reached for it. He slid it a centimeter closer to my side. "Grantor reviews first," he said mildly. Caleb glanced between us. "I can manage this," he said, voice clear. "We cancel the gym and the streaming bundle. We sell the extra tools. We stop calling emergencies the urge to buy sneakers." From the archway, Ria scoffed. "You're letting a stranger rewrite our budget." Adrian didn't smile. "I'm not a stranger," he said. "I'm the person who bought the note so no one else could use it to make your mother homeless." It was not a flourish. It was a legible line. The deputy finished his log and, with a nod to daylight, left us to our furniture. I took 10 minutes alone in my bedroom. Hands on the dresser like it was a railing on a ferry. Everything was both familiar and fundamentally rearranged. The mirror offered a face with a new set of settings. Warmer. Yes, but also steadier. I tied back the curtains. Outside, the maple did its faithful favorite trick, making lace out of sun. Sidebar, odd fact. The common house key, SC1, has 5 cuts, but the order of depths can make more than 7,000 unique combinations. Add a 6th pin, and the possibilities leap into the millions. Security isn't magic. It's math choosing not to be lazy. When I came back to the kitchen, Adrian had laid out 3 envelopes addressed to different offices, utility identity locks we'd activated now memorialized in ink. "We file these even though we already put notes on the accounts," he said. "Paper with friends." He handed me one more, a certified letter to Internal Affairs referencing Dalton's conduct at my doorstep. "You can send or hold," he said. "We don't poke for sport, but we don't look away." I slid it under the potato paperweight with the quiet gravity of things that can wait and still be true. At 11, the doorbell announced an uninvited chorus line. Dalton in uniform, a woman from Codes and Inspections, and a man with a clipboard who introduced himself as a housing consultant. They smelled like a plan. Adrian stood and opened the door just enough for the law, not enough for the entourage. "We're not accepting consultants today," he said, "but we'll take business cards." Dalton's jaw performed a degree of clench that would be impressive in a vice. "There was a report of unsafe conditions," the Codes woman said. Reading from a script that had been handed to her by yesterday, Adrian held up Judge Turner's order. "Any inspection will be scheduled through the court," he said. "We're happy to accommodate daylight and proper notice. Today is for keys, not pageants." The Codes woman nodded slowly, already recognizing the relief of a process she trusted. The clipboard man faded. Dalton lingered like a stain, then left with a promise of bureaucracy that sounded like a dare. Light joke number 2, when the door closed. I told Adrian I'd grade that attempt a C- for choreography and a solid F for costume design. He awarded extra credit for arriving during business hours. We used the adrenaline for good. Caleb called the insurance to add me as the only claimant on the house policy. He read the phrase, "No changes without in-person ID," in his careful voice, and the agent said, "Bless you. We put a hold on any mail forwarding. Miss Patel from the postal inspector's office emailed back a tidy "noted" that felt like a seatbelt. At lunch, we ate standing up, because sandwiches sometimes prefer a vertical audience. Rhea announced she would be out for the afternoon. The way a storm announces it will not be consulted, she left without asking who would have a key when she returned. The quiet after did not mourn her absence. It breathed. Caleb cleaned the back doorway like contrition has a scrub brush, without the crowd. He looked his age, tired in the way that comes from trying to be 2 people in one day. "I thought keeping peace meant doing nothing," he said, voice quiet. "Turns out, keeping peace is just slower verbs." I nodded. "Peace is paperwork with manners." By 2. Adrian and I were at the clerk's counter to record the forbearance and the notice of interest. Miss Lark, frog clipped, stamped, and slid a receipt across that could stop a small avalanche. "You're building a little city of paper," she said. "Cities need lights. You've brought enough." On our way out, we passed a bulletin board where a flyer curled, "Know your tenant rights. Free clinic." Adrian tapped it with a scientist's satisfaction. "The universe likes symmetry," he said. "You needed that 2 nights ago. Today you're the proof it works." Back home, a text from an unknown number blinked. "Enjoy the win. Paper burns." I sent it to Major Ellison, then blocked the number. Adrian set a small, unobtrusive camera above the porch, Maribel's hummingbird model, and labeled the file Front Sunny Day. We did not discuss it like a spy story. We called it what it is. Memory with a timestamp. Academic phrase of the day. Bonus, because the afternoon decided to be educational. Retaliatory conduct. The public argument that a landlord or agent cannot punish a tenant for asserting rights. Changing locks again. Fake inspections. Quiet threats that want to be louder later. Courts like causes, not tantrums. We ended with something human. Caleb brought roses from the yard, 3 that hadn't learned to be perfect yet, and put them in the jam jar that once held apricot strategies. For the table, he said. For your room, he corrected himself. For wherever you need to see them. He stood a little taller after the sentence, as if grammar had spine. Light joke number 3. I told him I'd invoice him for emotional floristry. He said he'd pay in labor and onion chopping, which is its own currency. Evening found me alone for a half hour, which felt like water finding its level. I unpacked my suitcase into drawers that remembered me, set my watercolor tin on the desk, and opened the window to let the maple translate wind into something I could trust. On the dresser, I placed a small tray with the new key, the index card Adrian wrote, and a pebble from a lake I haven't visited in years. The tray looked like a thesis: access, honor, weight. Before bed, I wrote 3 lines. Because ritual is a fence you can lean on. The door said yes because we taught it the word. Authority is a tool, not a costume. Tomorrow, we file the insurance addendum, bake something for Miss Lark, and teach the spare key its manners at the clerk's office. I added a 4th for luck. Do not let victory make you noisy. The house settled into its honest sounds, the new cylinder whispering to itself. The refrigerator performing quiet math. The maple telling the same story to the same wind and finding new ways to end it. I locked the door with a turn I could feel in the bones of my hand, the subtle thrill of a mechanism clicking into the future we wrote for it. By morning, the new lock had learned my name. It turned with the small, confident exhale of a decision you can defend. I made oatmeal the way people do when they plan to use their voice later, plain, with a little honey so the sentences don't sound like gravel. Adrian texted 1 word, table. That meant his kitchen, 2 mugs, and paper arranged like dignified dominoes. He'd already set out today's choreography, a draft, forbearance plus restructure for Caleb to sign, a 1-page no changes without notice protocol for the house, and 3 stamped envelopes, internal affairs, codes, and inspections. And the clerk, each addressed in his square, patient hand. He slid me a pen. We'll keep it boring, he said. Which is how he says, we'll keep it safe. Elder wisdom. Before any hard conversation, tidy the small things you can touch. Put a coaster under the mug. Clip the pages. Check the batteries. Readiness makes courage less expensive. We walked through the plan out loud so our mouths could hear the verbs. 10 o'clock, I said. We meet Caleb at the annex to sign the forbearance and the house protocol. Then, Adrian added, we propose a stipulated order. The court signs the rules you live by, so no one can pretend they were optional. Academic phrase of the day. Stipulated order. The public argument that opponents can agree to terms in writing and ask a judge to sign them. Turning a handshake into a rule with teeth. It's not drama. It's a door that stays shut unless everyone knocks. At 9:50, we set conference room B like a stage that refuses melodrama. Recorder visible, chairs even, copies in triplicate. Caleb arrived on time with a brown paper look on his face, the kind humility wears when it's learning to fit. He signed the forbearance with care, then the protocol that says who enters, when, and how. I'll file the cashier's check for the fees right after this, he said, voice steady. Good, I answered. Bring the receipt to the table like a flower. Ria arrived at 10:11, carrying perfume and impatience. I'm not agreeing to anything permanent, she said, dropping into the chair that squeaks. Perfect, Adrian replied mildly. It's temporary until the court signs. Then it's durable. He slid her a copy. She glanced, then reached for a highlighter as if coloring could change nouns. The recorder hummed its tiny hymn about accuracy. Light joke number 1. I set a tin of cookies at the edge of the table and announced they were incentives for correct use of verbs. Caleb smiled. Rhea did not apply for the program. We kept it simple. Daylight-only discussions. No surprise visitors. All service requests in writing with 48-hour notice unless the water heater throws a tantrum. Keys logged. Spares sealed at the clerk's office. No metaphors after 8 p.m., preserved as our house law. Rhea started to protest, then saw her own reflection in the recorder's little red eye and edited herself into silence. When we finished, Adrian placed a fourth paper on the table like a peaceable stone. One more thing, he said. A stipulation that no one contacts inspectors, law enforcement, or utilities about this house without copying Evelyn. No more anonymous reports that turn out to have names. Rhea's jaw performed a small isometric workout. You can't police speech, she said. We can police process, Adrian answered gently. Daylight is not a gag, it's a lantern. We walked to the clerk's window. Miss Lark frog-clipped the stipulation with the cheer of a person who enjoys a rule that files itself. Judge Turner will like this, she said, stamping. He's fond of verbs that earn their shoes. We left with a hearing time for midweek, a promise of a signature, and 3 copies that smelled faintly of ink and relief. Sidebar, odd fact, thermal receipts. The shiny ones the register spits out fade if you leave them in heat or sunlight. The ink isn't ink, it's heat-reactive dye. If you need a record to survive summer, photocopy it or scan it. Paper is mortal unless you respect its diet. From the clerk, we walked 2 doors down to codes and inspections. The same woman who'd come with Dalton yesterday stood behind the counter reading a form the way gardeners read weather. Adrian handed her our letter. We want to schedule any inspection through the court, he said. And we'd appreciate a note that anonymous complaints about this address go into Daylight before they go into trucks. She glanced at the judge's order and nodded with something like relief. My clipboard loves clarity, she confessed. Tell your porch we'll visit when everyone wears name tags. At noon. We ate sandwiches at Adrian's table, the world's most honest conference room. Caleb read the forbearance again, slower. I can do this, he said. Not bravado, just arithmetic that had finally learned not to round up. He left to file the cashier's check, promising to send a photo of the receipt before the ink dried. The house felt like a held breath. Rhea texted from a number I hadn't saved. You think a piece of paper will stop life? I typed and deleted a dozen replies, then settled on the sentence that has salvaged more days than tea. Yes. I added a photo of the stamp because some people don't recognize an answer until it wears a seal. Light joke number 2. Adrian awarded me a cookie for short, verifiable sass. I took it to be polite to the grading rubric. Afternoon brought the quiet work that survives the plot twists. We labeled a binder tab Stipulation, printed calendar invites for our daylight-only windows, and delivered a copy of the protocol to the deputy on the block so the street didn't have to guess. I put a copy on the refrigerator because fridges are community boards with opinions. At 3, Miss Patel from the postal inspector's office called with news shaped like a straight line. Forwarding attempts have stopped. Your identity lock is live. The cluster box impersonator is cooperating, and we have a statement naming who asked for access. She didn't say Rhea. She didn't have to. I will send a copy to the U.S. attorney and to your clerk, she added. Efficient as rain. Adrian's phone buzzed next. He listened, said, "Uh-huh," twice, and hung up. Internal Affairs logged our complaint, he said. Dalton will be asked to explain Thursday night's cool-off decision with his body camera off and his conflict of interest on. He looked tired in the way men look when they've spent their afternoons refusing to be theatrical. "We won't watch," he added. "We'll let the room do its job. We walk my rooms at dusk the way you walk a garden after wind." Nothing had moved except my breath. Caleb texted a photo of the filed receipt as promised. I set it under the potato paperweight that has grown into a small planet of gravity on my table. Rhea drove by once, slow, like a weather system shopping for a map. She did not stop. The porch light kept its own counsel and stayed on. Elder wisdom, the second cup. When someone tries to pull you into the hallway of what if, invite them to the room of what is and point to the papers on the table. Real life likes chairs. We ended the day where Adrian likes to end days that matter, at the piano beneath the photo of the pier. He doesn't play well. He plays softly. 3 chords, a pause, one more chord that feels like a tidy stamp on the margin. "Tomorrow," he said. We deliver the stipulation to Turner and ask for his signature before lunch. "And after lunch?" I asked. "You," he said, "will rest in a house where the door knows your name." Light joke number 3. I told him I'd nap with the forbearance under my pillow to see if I could absorb fiscal responsibility by osmosis. He recommended conventional absorption, calendar reminders, and a pen that refuses to sign after 8 p.m. Before sleep, I wrote my 3 lines on the card that lives by my lamp. A rule we all signed is a quieter neighbor than a threat without a stamp. Love does not mind daylight, only drama does. Tomorrow, I will let the judge turn our verbs into a doorframe. I turned the key once, then twice, just to hear the promised land. The refrigerator hummed its accountant hymn, outside. The maple-stitched evening to the roofline. I went to bed in a room that does not audition for metaphors anymore. It simply holds. And the lock, the one that learned my name, turned its tiny brass head toward sleep and kept watch like a polite sentinel who's very good at saying no. We reached Judge Turner's courtroom right when the hallway clocks agreed on morning. Miss Lark met us outside with a stack frog-clipped like a choir, our stipulation on top. The forbearance tucked behind, and a cover sheet that read, "Proposed order, access and conduct." Adrian smoothed the corners the way he smooths all beginnings. I placed the recorder, visible, quiet, because accuracy likes companions. Turner read without theatrics, lips moving like a person who respects verbs. "All right," he said, pen poised. "Both sides consent?" Caleb nodded, earnest as fresh stationery. Rhea, who had materialized beside him in perfume and certainty, lifted her chin. "I object to the tone," she said. Turner blinked. A single judicial semaphore. "We sign tones only at music shops," he answered. "This is paper." He inked his name. The stamp landed with the soft thud of a door choosing yes. Elder wisdom. If you can turn a habit into a document, you can turn a document into a rule. People argue with stories, they obey dates. We walked the signed order to filing like pallbearers for drama and watched it disappear into the clerk's ordinary miracle. Miss Lark slid us certified copies. "Treat these like umbrellas," she said. "Carry them for the weather you hope won't come." Rhea attempted a pivot in the hallway. "Caleb and I will manage the home," she announced. "Performing executive summary." Adrian tilted his head toward the copies in my hand. "The order says Evelyn manages entry, notice, and keys," he replied. Tone said to library, "You manage your calendar." She glared at the paper with the aggrieved wonder of someone who has just met consequences and finds them underdressed. Academic phrase of the day. Court-approved stipulation. The public agreement of the parties, stamped into enforceability by a judge. It isn't a handshake, it's a hinge. Push it. And it pushes back with sheriffs and schedules. We stepped into noon like a porch, bright, unhurried. Caleb peeled off toward the bank to copy the order for his HR file. The way a man picks a good habit and tries it on. Adrian and I detoured through codes and inspections to give a courtesy copy to the clipboard woman. She read the judge's signature and exhaled the way professional lungs exhale when the right paper finally arrives. "No anonymous calls get trucks," she promised, tapping a note into her system. "Daylight only. At home." The door recognized my key on the first try. I swear the cylinder hummed a syllable. I poured water into the peace lily and let the room reacquaint itself with the feeling of a house being piloted by the person who sleeps there, the refrigerator. Moved last week to a bossy angle. Returned to its usual corner with a small scrape that sounded like apology. Light joke number 1. I saluted the trash can and told it the new regime would respect pickup schedules and the separation of powers. The lid promised nothing, but did its quiet. Hingy bow. We ate soup at Adrian's table. Because soup is Switzerland. Caleb texted a photo of the HR copy filed and unprompted. A screenshot of calendar reminders titled "Rent, not sneakers." I sent back a frog emoji and the single word "received," which is how affection behaves on paperwork days. The afternoon tried some theater. A white van rolled slow past my house at 2:13, then again at 2:19, as if time could be intimidated. Adrian tapped the porch camera app. "Plates caught," he murmured, forwarding the image to Miss Patel and Sheriff Ortiz with the subject, "Drive-by interest, no thank you." 5 minutes later, Ortiz replied, "Known, consultant, already warned, logging as potential retaliatory contact." Sidebar. Odd fact. Vanity license plates are easier to remember, but not necessarily easier to track. Many states restrict public lookup. Investigators still prefer the ugly. Sequential ones, fewer confusions. More straight lines. Pretty letters make messy spreadsheets. At 3 o'clock, a text from Internal Affairs arrived. "Interview with Sergeant Dalton scheduled. Please confirm availability to submit statement re Thursday incident." Adrian raised an eyebrow, his version of a trumpet fanfare. "You can send the order and your affidavit," he said. "No elaboration. Let the video, or the lack of it, tell the rest." We printed my short account. Door, lock, refusal to knock. Suggestion to cool off in spite of residence proof. 4 sentences, 1 stamp, paper prefers portion control. Rhea appeared at 3:30 in a dress that expected applause. "Caleb," she called from the sidewalk, "we're late for a showing." I stepped onto the porch with the calm that has become my costume. "No listings involving this address," I said, "without written consent and court notice. The order says so." I held it at a polite distance. The embossed seal caught the sun like a tiny, lawful planet. She retreated, a tide reconsidering its tideness. Adrian set 2 chairs on the porch and sat without commentary, which is how you stand your ground while seated. We watched a sparrow attempt marketing on a twig it clearly didn't need. The world insisted on being itself. This felt like victory's true flavor. Light joke number 2. I told Adrian that if peace had a sound, it would be a clothes dryer finishing without beeping. He nominated a stapler closing gently. We agreed to disagree and kept the chairs. By late afternoon, codes and inspections emailed a schedule for a routine check per occupant's request. The words "per occupant" were my favorite spices. I put the appointment on the fridge and the calendar and the inside of a cabinet door, because redundancy is not paranoia, it's love with a clipboard. Then we took the order on tour. Utility office, insurer, the postal station, like a band whose only song is "by the book." Each counter added a note to our file. Each clerk softened when I used the sentence, "Please note, I'm acting under a court order." It's remarkable how many doors prefer sentences to volume. At the postal counter, Miss Patel's colleague scanned the order and muttered, "Wish every complaint came with this much daylight." She added a block, "No forwards, holds, or P.O. box changes without in-person ID." The screen blinked, locked. which is exactly how contentment looks when your contentment is male. We got home to flowers. Not a bouquet and a gesture, but the stubborn roses Caleb had cut yesterday. Refreshed. He'd swapped the jam jar for a real vase, a humble one. The kind sturdy kitchens own, a yellow sticky note on the lip, filed, paid, see you in daylight. The handwriting didn't wobble. If apologies have fonts, this one had upgraded to Garamond. Academic phrase of the day, bonus, because the hours learned multiplication. Contempt, when a court's clear order is met with clear refusal. The law can discipline behavior until it remembers how to act. I sincerely hoped never to taste it. But I liked knowing the pantry stocked it just in case. Evening brought the first quiet we hadn't negotiated. Unearned. Ordinary. I watered the peace lily again, not because it needed it, but because I needed a verb that looked like care. We set tomorrow's plan on the table. Inspection prep. 1 pie for Miss Lark. Label, stationary fuel. And a 10-minute call with the mortgage servicer to make sure their database met Adrian's handwriting with the respect it deserved. Light joke number 3. I taped a small index card above the key hook that read, "No metaphors after 8 p.m. Caleb walked in, read it, and said, "What about similes?" "They can visit on weekends," I said. He grinned like a man discovering his house is funnier when it's safer. He handed me a receipt, filing fees, cashier's check stub, a note from HR acknowledging court schedule flexibility. I put them under the potato paperweight, which has turned into an ungentle. Gentle moon on my desk. We sat with plates and did not debrief, we ate. Peace can be a dinner tactic. Before bed, I stood at the doorway of my room and let the day be tall. The quilt kept its colors, the dresser kept its scars. The new lock kept its promise without bragging. My index card by the lamp received a fresh triptych, signed order, silence. Neighbors, keep your politeness. I'll keep my keys. When fear says run, bring a chair. I turned the key once, hearing the brass whisper its tiny amen. Somewhere down the block, a television tried to sell a miracle mop somewhere nearer. Adrian set a glass on a coaster because he practices what he asks paper to do, leave no ring. The maple outside wrote lace on the wall. The house exhaled. I let my lungs adopt its rhythm. Tomorrow, we'll host an inspection that behaves. Bake a pie that explains gratitude better than speeches. And let the order sit on the counter like the most attractive centerpiece in the room. Not because it's pretty, but because it makes everything else possible. Doors do not keep you safe by being dramatic. They keep you safe by being exact. Mine has learned its lines. The morning of the inspection arrived with the calm of a librarian unlocking doors. I set the signed order on the counter where sunlight could read it. Opened windows for honest air, and brewed coffee with the sort of patience you borrow from trees. Caleb came early wearing a shirt that had made its peace with ironing. He carried a clipboard like it was a new language textbook, and he intended to pass. At 9 sharp, the codes officer from yesterday stepped onto the porch with a tape measure. A checklist, and the steady politeness of someone who has seen both dignity and theater and prefers the former. "Routine safety and habitability," she said, nodding to my order as if it were her co-worker. "Per occupant's request." The phrase warmed the hallway. We walked the rooms in a choreography that didn't step on toes. She checked smoke alarms, chirp, chirp, compliant, ran water to test temperature, peeked at the GFCI outlet like it was a shy student, and wrote numbers in ink that didn't apologize. When she bent under the sink, I stood back so her professionalism had elbow room. She did not pry, she did not gossip, she did her job, imagine that. Elder wisdom. If you want people to take care of your house, make it easy for them to find the truth. Empty the sink. Label the fuse box. Have the paper they'll ask for already on the counter. Consideration is a tool. Halfway through, Adrian appeared with pastries labeled carb compliance and a thermos of tea that knew how to whisper. He stayed out of the way, which is its own talent. Ria was conspicuously absent. The quiet felt purposeful rather than lonely. Academic phrase of the day: good faith compliance. The public argument that, beyond bare minimums, you demonstrate intent to meet rules honestly and promptly. Inspectors aren't just hunting violations, they're reading your posture. Today our posture said, we like rules that keep kitchens from becoming courtrooms. The codes officer tested the back door's latch and raised an eyebrow. This strikes a hair shallow, she said. Not unsafe, just fussy. A deeper strike plate would give you fewer sighs. She made a small note. Adrian added strike plate to our shopping list like a person collecting commas. Anything else? I asked. She smiled. You've kept receipts, labels, and batteries, she said. That's 90% of prevention. We'll send a short memo. No corrections required. Installation of deeper plate optional. Optional. What a tender word. Sidebar. Odd fact. Smoke alarms have a tiny bit of radioactive americium-241 in ionization models. Sealed. Safe. Humming along to ionize air so tiny, smoke particles change current. The quiet science of please wake me if the world goes weird. When she left, I exhaled like the house had handed me back my lungs. Caleb looked almost disappointed at the lack of drama, then smiled as if he'd discovered the appeal of boredom. So, now what? He asked. Now, I said. We send a copy of her memo to the clerk, the utility, and the insurer so future versions of us don't have to reinvent the afternoon. We had barely stapled the first 2 envelopes when my phone buzzed with a number that had come to mean orderly news. Internal affairs. Interview concluded, the email read. Body cam inactive at initial contact, conflict disclosure not made, remedial training, and suspension pending. I read it twice to make sure I hadn't wished it into being. The sentence didn't crow. It clicked. Adrian's face softened in that particular way men's faces do when justice behaves like a machine instead of a mood. Light joke number 1. I told him I'd bake IAA a pie labeled, for doing your job. Extra slices for anyone who took notes. He said their office was more coffee than pie. But we could test the thesis. At noon, Ria swept in smelling of citrus and strategy. You can't keep hiding behind paper, she said. Life is messier. I gestured to the inspection memo on the counter. Mess welcomes order, I said. Today's special is order with a side of optional strike plate. She rolled her eyes hard enough to threaten gravity. Caleb stood, cleared his throat, and read the 3 lines we'd practiced. Keys are logged. Entry requires notice. We use the court. His voice trembled only on court, then righted itself like a boat remembering keel. She pivoted to finances. We can't afford this forbearance long term, she said to him, pointedly skipping me. We can, he answered, by changing our verbs. He lifted the envelope with the cashier's receipt. Paid, he said. And the word put its small shoulders under the room. Adrian slid a new page forward, tone cordial. And because endings matter, he said, here is a proposed quiet enjoyment clause for the stipulated order. No harassment, no interference, no third-party consultants knocking uninvited. He tapped the line where it lived. Neat as a railing. Ria's laugh did a little tap dance. You're ridiculous. I'm repeatable, Adrian said. That's what paper is for. The doorbell rang. Sheriff Ortiz, plainclothes today, stepped in with a folder tucked under one arm and a smile that only moved the corners of her mouth. Just making a courtesy call, she said. The van that loitered earlier, warned the impersonator, pled to a lesser but educational offense. Community service involves mailing forms correctly. Her eyes flicked to Ria, then away. The judge granted your stipulated order this morning. Lark is frog-clipping copies as we speak. The timing made Ria's shoulders lose a half-inch of height. We signed the new clause. Ortiz took one copy, the kitchen kept another. The house felt newly framed, like a drawing with the lines inked and the pencil erased. Light joke number 2. I told Ortiz we were starting a neighborhood club called Fans of Enforceable Agreements. She said she preferred shorter names and long weekends, but to sign her up. After she left, the air held. Ria stared at the refrigerator where our house protocol lived under a magnet shaped like a tomato. She read the lines. Daylight, notice. No metaphors after 8 p.m. And for a flicker of a second, I saw the person she might yet be if she ever got tired of rehearsing. I won't sign anything else today, she said, softer than she planned. You don't have to, I answered. The court did. She let the silence finish for her and walked out without slamming the door. A tiny miracle, but I circled it in my mind anyway. Afternoon was for the unglamorous work that makes a life. We added the inspection memo to the binder. We set a calendar reminder to replace smoke alarm batteries on a date that feels like autumn. Adrian installed the deeper strike plate with the reverence of someone tuning a piano. When the new latch clicked, the sound had the civility of a handshake. We made tea. Caleb chopped an onion with a penitent precision I have come to adore. I told HR I'll be in late on court days, he said. They said thank you for the documentation. He looked at me. I'm learning that my boss likes paperwork, not apologies. Most rooms do, I said. We're just late to the party. Sidebar, odd fact, a standard door latch is beveled, so the door closes smoothly if you flip it during installation. Every close is a small argument. Some people live with that for years. Today our latch learned to say please. Just before dusk, a delivery arrived addressed to me, a medium box, no return logo, weight like a book. I sliced the tape carefully. Inside, a vintage key hook plaque, small brass birds on a walnut strip, and a note written in painstaking block letters. For the keys that know your name. No signature, but the handwriting looked like a man teaching himself steadiness. Caleb pretended to inspect the onion, then shrugged without looking up. It's from me, he said. I want to help the house remember who it belongs to. I set the plaque on the wall by the door where purpose lives. The birds held our keys like a choir holds notes. Light joke number 3, I told him if he kept this up, I'd promote him to assistant keeper of quiet. Do I get a badge? He asked. You get Thursdays off from similes, I said. He accepted the terms. Evening folded itself like a well-taught napkin. I called Miss Lark to say thank you. Her frog clip was now a talisman in our story. She said she'd frame my pie label if I kept writing like a person who knows what stamps are for. Adrian and I walked the block once. The way you do when you want to tell the street you can be trusted to come back. The maple gave us its lace. The porch light agreed to be boring. Before bed, I wrote 3 lines on the card by my lamp. Order signed, inspection passed. Latch behaving. This is a plot twist called stability. Fear is loud. Legitimacy is legible. Tomorrow we hang the bird hook, call the insurer with our memo, and teach the spare key its cabinet manners. I turned the lock and listened to the new plate accept the tongue with that precise little kiss of metal on metal, civilization's punctuation. In the next room, Adrian set 2 cups to dry upside down, as if they were practicing boundaries. The refrigerator hummed its B-flat, somewhere far off. Traffic rehearsed its endless exit. My house learned another quiet. I let my bones learn it too. Morning practiced good manners on the countertops. Light laid itself down without fanfare. And the signed orders sat under the potato paperweight like a polite boulder. Caleb hung the little walnut bird hook by the door, leveled it twice. Then once more because redemption likes symmetry. Our keys took their places with a soft metal choir. Adrian brewed coffee and read aloud our tiny agenda. Insurer call. Clerk, thank you. Internal affairs follow-up, and, if time permits, teach the spare key its cabinet manners. The cabinet, for its part, looked ready to graduate. At 10. The insurer's line answered with a human whose voice remembered weekends. We sent the inspection memo and the court order. They added a discount for documented risk reduction, which felt like getting paid for sweeping. Caleb fist-bumped the air, then looked embarrassed about fist-bumping air, which is how good habits begin. Elder wisdom. If a day seems wobbly, do something small that clicks. Tighten a hinge. Label a folder. Return a cart. Little completions carry big ones on their shoulders. I carried a pie to the clerk's office, a lattice crust labeled stationary fuel, and Miss Lark accepted it like evidence. You breathed life into nouns, she said. Frog clip already waiting for the thank you card I hadn't written yet. Back home. We filed a short statement with Internal Affairs, 4 sentences, no commentary, and attached the order, the inspection memo, and the timeline the deputy had logged. Paper with friends, Adrian murmured, the only clique I endorse. By noon, a text chirped from Sheriff Ortiz. IA confirmed suspension pending. Dalton off any calls to your address. Also, your consultant acquaintances have been advised they are unwelcome accessories to the plot. The quiet that followed felt earned, like the space after a librarian says, shh, and the room remembers how. Academic phrase of the day, quiet enjoyment. The public argument that once you're entitled to occupy a place, you deserve to use it without harassment, interference, or orchestrated nuisances. It isn't luxury, it's the ground floor of home. We decided to practice quiet enjoyment like a craft. Adrian changed the backdoor strike plate, optional, now perfect. Caleb adjusted the stove knob so it lined up with truth, and I sorted the drawer of misfit batteries into lives, later, and let go. The refrigerator stopped trying to be a corner tyrant and settled back where a good appliance belongs. Competent, quiet, slightly smug. Light joke number 1. I held up a mystery key from the junk bowl and asked, ex-boyfriends or ex-blenders? Caleb voted blender. We retired it with full honors to the jar marked unclaimed futures. The doorbell delivered a thin envelope addressed to me with the careful penmanship people use when they're trying to be the best version of themselves. Inside, a money order covering locksmith costs and filing fees, and a scrap of paper with 4 words, I'm learning, see. I showed Caleb. He looked at the ceiling and nodded to something only he could see. Thank you, I texted back. Bring your receipt, daylight. He replied with a sticker of a frog saluting, which I planned to frame mentally. Afternoon brought a summons of a gentler kind. Miss Patel asked if we could step outside for 5 minutes to walk her through the porch camera angles. She arrived in plain clothes, hair braided tight, and inspected the hummingbird device as if it were a witness that needed encouragement. Angles good, she said. Retention set to 12 days. Make it 30 and don't narrate to the camera when you're mad. She smiled. It records tone. We laughed and promised to keep our theater on paper. Sidebar, odd fact. Hummingbirds' hearts can beat more than 1,000 times per minute when they sleep. They enter torpor and slow way down to survive the night. Humans call our version a nap with boundaries. We took a boundary nap when we woke. The house had kept our place in the story. Ria's car passed once, slow, then again faster, then not again. Perhaps because the order on the fridge has become famous. At 3. A ding. The court calendar slotted our quiet enjoyment clause into its docket and returned it stamped. The embossed seal shone like a practical moon. Adrian opened a new folder. There's one more hinge to oil, he said gently. Social damage. Ria called 3 neighbors with the phrase, unsafe matriarch. They won't say it to your face, but they're storing it next to their sugar. He looked at me, not rescuing, not pretending. Would you like a small, factual letter to the block? I thought of the Maples lace, of lawn chairs that prefer cordiality over whispers. Yes, I said, short, boring, true. We wrote, judge's order attached, inspection passed, keys logged, any concerns? Please schedule through codes and inspections with me copied. No adjectives, just a porch light in paragraphs. We walked the block at dusk with envelopes and smiles that meant neighbor, not press conference. Mrs. Hassan at the corner took hers and patted my hand. No gossip. Just bread in the oven and the question, do you prefer cardamom or cinnamon? Cardamom, always. Light joke number 2. Adrian suggested we start a newsletter called The Bored Citizen. Tagline, paperwork and pastries. Subscriptions include a magnet that says, no metaphors after 8 p.m. At home. The bird hook held our keys like a small orchestra at rest. I hung the spare in the cabinet in an envelope labeled, open only with daylight. The cabinet accepted the ceremony with its usual dignity. Caleb arrived with his receipt and a bag of bulk tea labeled, calming but caffeinated. I approved the contradiction. We sat on the porch, 3 chairs and late sun. Caleb spoke first. I have a meeting with a counselor, he said. I want to stop being the kind of person who avoids hard rooms. He looked at me, then Adrian. I'll also start sending you my calendar on Sunday nights for the week, not to report, to coordinate. I reached for his hand. He let me have it. We'll be boring together, I said. Imagine the meals. Academic phrase of the day. Bonus track because the heart was studying. Restorative practice. The public approach that asks not only what rule was broken, but who was harmed. What do they need and who is responsible for meeting that need? We aren't a circle with talking sticks, but our table is trying. The phone buzzed, unknown. I let it become voicemail. A man's voice offered to broker a settlement of the social sort. Translation, drama within voice. I forwarded it to Ortiz with the subject, unnecessary entrepreneurship. Ortiz replied with a thumbs up and a sentence, our favorite kind to decline. Light joke number 3. I told the porch we were open for silent partnerships only, the kind where neighbors bring tomatoes and keep their volumes reasonable. The porch agreed by continuing to be wood. Evening cooled the edges. I called internal affairs to confirm they had my 4-sentence statement. They did. I wrote a note to myself. Don't gloat, bake. Gratitude is easier to digest than triumph. I mixed dough for cookies with the steady rhythm of a person who believes in recipes and rules. Adrian read me the weather for tomorrow as if it were poetry. Clear skies, he said. Light wind. Administrative serenity, I answered. Before bed. I set 3 items on the dresser tray. My key, the bird hook's spare envelope, still sealed, and the index card Adrian wrote on the first night. You are not a problem to be managed. You are a person to be honored. The words have aged well. So have we. I wrote my 3 lines for the lamp card. Quiet enjoyment is a practice, not just a clause. Neighbors learn faster from pastries than from speeches. Tomorrow, we deliver cookies to desks that stamped verbs into furniture, and we water the peace lily with slow confidence. I turned the lock. The deeper strike plate answered with that tidy metal kiss that might be civilization's favorite sound. The refrigerator hummed its accountant's B-flat. The maple explained moonlight to the wall, somewhere down the block. A television tried to sell something loud. Our house chose uneventful. Again. On purpose. The bird hook held our small orchestra at rest. The night learned our name and used it properly. Summer practiced being gentle. The maple stitched new lace on the wall. The refrigerator kept humming its accountant's B-flat. And somewhere inside those quiets, a whole season went by, turning paperwork into furniture. The inspection passed. The stipulated order learned to sit. Internal affairs did what rules ask. and the van with opinions stopped circling. We used the calm like lumber, shelves, lists, routines. And then one evening, on a porch that smelled like lemon oil and rain, Adrian asked me a question that arrived with no drum roll, only breath. "Would you like my last name?" he said. "To sit beside yours on some envelopes, only if it makes you taller." He offered a ring that didn't try to be rich, it tried to be sure. I didn't cry, I nodded. Then he nodded. Then we both looked at the maple because it understands vows without needing to clap. We told Caleb first. He brought roses that hadn't learned to be perfect yet and asked what cautiously happy looks like. "Like this," I said, and handed him the vase. We chose a lake for the ceremony, the kind of lake that has opinions on wind and no interest in drama. Sheriff Ortiz signed as witness because she believes in good paper. Miss Lark stood up with me because frog clips count as garters in our religion. Caleb read a poem that remembered to breathe. The vows were verbs: listen, file, return, water, rest. I wore a dress the color of a practiced dawn. Adrian wore a suit that had learned to sit, to stand down. We exchanged rings and calendars. The maple was not invited, but sent a cousin, an elm that made a cathedral out of shade. Elder wisdom. Being loved is not a project, it's a practice. Choose the daily that keeps the promise reachable. Labels on the jars. A chair by the door. A sentence you can say even when tired. I'm here. After the cake, lemon. Because we respect citrus, we signed the only flourish our story allows. A simple certificate, filed before the frosting dried. Miss Patel mailed it herself. Then returned to eat 2 small slices, standing up like a person in a good hurry. Ria did not attend. Her absence did not pull the room off center. Somewhere. A docket turned its page. Somewhere. A community service log accepted a first hour. I allowed myself one breath of pity, then set it down where it couldn't burn. Academic phrase of the day. Prenuptial agreement. The public argument that 2 adults can write. Before marriage. A map for property, debts, and expectations so future storms don't have to improvise. Not a prediction of failure. A promise to fight fair with paper. We made one. Short and legible. House in my name. Trust for Caleb if I go first. Adrian's separate cottage still his. Everything else decided by chairs and receipts. Not midnight metaphors. We moved slowly into the wraparound porch house he'd been building, the one with windows that open and stairs that don't pretend to be dramatic. The old place. My place. Stayed mine with a tenant I chose, Mrs. Hassan's niece, who bakes bread on Thursdays and spells quiet properly. The bird hook plaque came with us. The keys did too, wearing their manners without complaint. On the new porch, we installed a bigger version, walnut, brass birds with room for guests who earn theirs. Sidebar, odd fact, people say there's a special vein, the vena amoris, running from the ring finger straight to the heart. It's a lovely myth. Anatomists disagree. The truth is better. Every finger has roots home. Commitment is less about a single vein and more about teaching your whole body which way the door is. We still kept the rituals that saved us. No metaphors after 8 p.m. Lives on a card by the key hook. The cabinet bears our spare in a sealed envelope labeled "Open only with daylight." Adrian plays the same 3 chords before bed, poorly and softly, and the house understands it's the sound of a day putting itself away. The potato paperweight came. Of course, now it holds a new index card. We chose this on purpose. The peace lily migrated and did not complain. Light joke number 1. I told the officiant we'd like our marriage certificate laminated like a library card. She said lamination was frowned upon, but she could frog clip a protective sleeve. We accepted the sacrament. We threw a small porch party 2 weeks later, the kind with iced tea, not megaphones. Neighbors brought tomatoes, jam. gossip that had learned to check its volume. I taped our quiet enjoyment clause inside the kitchen cabinet like art. Mrs. Hassan tasted the air and declared it seasoned correctly. Caleb grilled with the concentration of a man attempting a new language. Smoke, sizzle. Period. He stood a little apart, then not apart at all, then washed dishes without being asked, which is how apologies grow up. Adrian showed him the trust we'd written, a modest scholarship for a kid from the block who promises to learn how to repair something. Pipes, engines, hearts, plus a small line that says, paperwork training funded if needed. Caleb looked at the clause and exhaled. You built a bridge under me, he said. Not quite asking, not quite confessing. We built a bridge we're willing to stand on, I corrected. Different. Light joke number 2, Theo, borrowed for the weekend, asked if marriage meant Adrian and I now had to share snacks by law. I told him yes, but we'd negotiated a last cookie clause. He considered becoming a lawyer just to arbitrate chocolate. Our new routines are deliciously undramatic. Morning, coffee, 2 mugs, the small chore that clicks, a hinge, a plant, a label fixed. Noon, a walk around the block where the elm practices shade. Afternoon, paperwork if needed, paint if weather agrees, and a 10-minute read aloud of something that isn't about law. Evening, the 3 chords, a fan hum, lights out with the porch keeping watch. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Internal Affairs, official. Simple. Action taken, training completed, reassignment away from related parties. I neither gloated nor forgave on demand. I put the letter in the binder under rooms that returned to their jobs and baked a pie that did not taste like triumph. It tasted like cinnamon minding its manners. A week later, Dallo from the collectibles shop sent a photograph of a new sign above his counter. Provenance required. If you don't know, we don't buy. He'd added a pamphlet stand labeled, Receipts Are Romance. Adrian sent a heart made of parentheses. I sent a frog. Light joke number 3. The moth reappeared, auditioning for porch mayor. I told it the position requires daylight hours and an understanding of Robert's rules. It tapped the window like it was seconding a motion. Caleb and I keep practicing the version of love that does not require acrobatics. He sends me his weekly calendar, I send him mine. We schedule dinner like adults, so neither of us has to pretend to be surprised. He has learned to say, I need advice, in daylight, without disguises. I have learned to say, not tonight, kindly, without explanations, small verbs, correct tense. On Sunday evenings, Adrian and I sit with pens and our boring miracle, a shared planner. We mark court, none this month, for the first time in too long, and community, bake for clerk. Water, peace lily. Maintenance, oil the porch latch. Joy, lake. We leave blank squares on purpose. Blank is not neglect, it is invitation. The wraparound porch holds us. We read there, we mend there, we let neighbor children hopscotch on the boards when the light is right. The bird hook glints like punctuation. Our rings do not set off alarms at the airport of daily life. They simply keep reminding our hands how to behave. Sometimes we dance absolutely badly to the 3 chords. Sometimes we just count them and call it choreography. Before bed, I write 3 lines for the little card that lives by the lamp in this new room that knows our names. We married for logistics and laughter. Romance is the dusting you do because you love the table. Quiet is not the absence of trouble, it's the presence of rules you chose. Tomorrow we'll mail thank yous and press rose petals between 2 pages that already know how to hold. The lock, I swear it recognizes our footsteps, offers its tidy metal kiss. The fan hums like a librarian who finally gets to read. The house breathes, and so do we, in the long married way that mixes ordinary with vow. Out on the lake, something small jumps twice, then decides it has made its point. The night, obedient. folds itself around our porch like a letter with a forwardable address, home, by September. The lake learned our names and the porch learned our footsteps. We put the bird hook plaque by the door of the new place, walnut, brass sparrows, then taught the spare key its cabinet manners in a fresh envelope labeled, in Adrian's patient hand. Open with daylight plus witnesses, on the fridge. Our unglamorous calendar behaved like a small orchestra. Dentist. Oil the latch. Water the peace lily. Bake for Miss Lark. Coffee with Mrs. Hassan. No metaphors after 8 p.m. The quiet wasn't empty. It was furnished. Caleb came every Wednesday with a sack of groceries and the sort of apology that has graduated from speeches to habits. He brings receipts, chops onions, wipes counters, and texts his Thursday chord of ordinary duties like a man putting rails on a bridge he once tried to jump. We don't rehearse forgiveness. We practice it by letting the past stand still while the present gets to work. Elder wisdom. Love is not a rescue. It's a rotation. Whose turn to cook? Whose turn to listen? Whose turn to say the practical no that keeps the house gentle? A letter arrived from the clerk. Our quiet enjoyment clause had lived unchallenged for 90 days and now wore the confidence of something ordinary. Another from Internal Affairs noted the completion of training and a reassignment that placed Sergeant Dalton away from situations that could learn his name badly. We clipped both under the potato paper weight that presides like a sensible moon. Paper with friends. It hasn't failed us yet. Academic phrase of the day. Statute of repose. The public argument that after a fixed time, certain claims can't be raised. Not because nothing happened, but because the system has chosen to let structures rest. Houses have them. So do hearts. We can remember without relitigating. Ria's orbit drifted. She sent 2 emails over the month, no adjectives, blessedly, about picking up a box of scarves and a ceramic rooster that used to guard the stove like a sassy sentry. I replied with 3 sentence fragments I trust. Daylight, annex lobby, 30 minutes. She arrived on time, signed a receipt, and left without rearranging the air. I wished her dull. Decent luck. That's all some stories should inherit from us. Sidebar. Odd fact. Keys on a ring jingle more in cold weather because metal contracts just enough to widen the play between teeth in summer. Everything swells and quiets. If your key sounds like sleigh bells in October, your house is telling you winter is writing a postcard. We turned toward the future like a dial. Adrian's cottage, the one he'd kept separate, became our Saturday project, a place for retired tools and half-finished jokes. We painted in sherbet colors. On purpose. Cantaloupe for the little door. Mint for the shelves. Because late life deserves more than beige. On breaks. He played his 3 chords and I graded them on a curve. He started a list titled Repairs That Can Be Taught. And we invited neighborhood teens to trade an hour of sanding for a lemon bar and a lesson on drill safety. We called it Fix and Snack, if paperwork saved us. A hammer might save the next kid. Caleb, who has finally fallen in love with receipts, brings a 3-ring binder to Fix and Snack labeled Earned. He's learning to be the dad who goes slow on purpose. He still stumbles. We still sigh. And then someone reads the rule on the fridge in a soft voice. And the boat finds keel. One afternoon, he held up an extra copy of the forbearance schedule and, without drama, said, I was afraid of paper because it didn't bend. Turns out, the bend was supposed to be in me. Light joke number 1. I told him growth spurts arrive in folders now. No squeaky shoes required. He laughed like a man who knows his own shoes again. We took a Sunday drive to the old block to bring Mrs. Hassan more jars. The tenant, her niece, has turned my former kitchen into a bread-scented country. She showed me the little changes she's made, hooks for mugs, a shy basil by the window. The quilt I left draped just so, and I felt a relief so pure it registered as quiet. Thank you for choosing me, she said. "Thank you for writing it down," I said back. We traded extra yeast for a photocopy of the inspection memo like the nerds we are. On the lake. We've learned a rhythm of unremarkable joys. We walk in the half-lit hour when the water votes for glass. Adrian skips stones and names each with a verb: file, return, rest, water, keep. I carry a small notebook and write 3 lines for the card by my lamp, then fold the pages like boats and let the wind steal what it wants. We make a practice of uneventfulness. It's my favorite sport. Light joke number 2. The moth ran for porch mayor again. I told it to file by the deadline and disclose donors. It tapped the window with the confidence of a candidate who believes lawn signs count as governance. The day the first cold arrived. We oiled the latch and the piano in the same hour. Wood approves of this symmetry. Adrian played his 3 chords, still softly, still badly. And I took it as our nightly stamp. Then we sat with Coco and talked about the next modest thing: a scholarship application for Fix and Snack, a thank you lunch where I bring pie and Miss Lark pretends not to be famous, an index card hung above the bird hook that reads, "Keys like routines. We don't plan grandly anymore, we plan like it's soil." A note came from Dallo at the collectibles shop, his new sign in the picture: "Provenance required," and a smaller placard: "Receipts are romance." He included a donation to our Fix and Snack jar and a line handwritten in careful shame: "Learning is slow, but it sticks." We sent back a cookie and a syllabus: daylight, serial numbers, a clerk who knows your name. Light joke number 3. I whispered to the potato paperweight that it's responsible for our entire civic revival. It declined comment, which is the correct posture for a civil servant. That evening, Caleb stayed late and fell asleep on the couch mid-documentary, his mouth slightly open in the expression of boys who used to do that much smaller on the blue chair by the window. We covered him with a quilt and labeled the moment. Quietly. Kept. I washed 2 mugs, then 3. The fan hummed its librarian hymn. The lock gave that tiny metal kiss that still feels like a ceremony and not a habit. The lake rehearsed moonlight like a responsible understudy before bed. I wrote my 3 lines for the lamp card. Peace is a schedule you keep even on bad days. Authority wants to be a tool, never let it be a costume. I married a man who files, and I became a woman who rests. I set the pen down and let the sentence end where it should, without flourish, with enough breath left for morning. Tomorrow, we'll teach a teen to hang a level, write a thank you that knows how to end, and open our door to whoever arrives bearing daylight and a desire to be ordinary with us. If grief once made a room for itself, quiet has now signed a longer lease. The porch agrees, the keys agree. My name agrees when I say it out loud to the mirror, and it doesn't wobble. Evenings drift into the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be admired. Lamplight on a calendar. The tidy metal kiss of a latch that has learned its line. The small chorus of keys resting on a walnut hook. A house that once hosted confrontation now practices choreography. Windows cracked to let in honest air. Inspection memos filed where sunlight can read them. An order that stands like a doorframe and does its work without speeches. The son arrives on Wednesdays with receipts and steady hands. The mother answers with pie, patience, and the sort of forgiveness that prefers verbs to violins. The woman who tried to make everything a staircase recedes into ordinary distances. Her emails, finally, use punctuation. A wedding happens by a lake with no appetite for drama. Vows use small, durable words. Listen, file, rest, and the rings feel less like trophies than reminders of the road back home. Neighbors choose cardamom or cinnamon, not sides. A clerk, in frog green, receives baked gratitude. A deputy learns to sign his name only where daylight allows. Paper continues to be a locksmith with good manners. There are odd facts to love, that keys jingle louder in cold weather, that smoke alarms hold a quiet star in their bellies, that cabinets have excellent memories if you treat them kindly. There's a new program called Fix and Snack, where teens swap sanding for lemon bars and a lesson on how not to fear tools. There is a card by the lamp that collects 3 truths each night and teaches the hand to stop when the sentence is finished. And there is rest. Finally, a porch that recognizes footsteps, a refrigerator that hums B-flat, a life that picks uneventfulness on purpose and calls it victory. The story closes its folder and leaves the lamp on for morning.